Everybody, welcome to the Knowles 24/7 Midseason Roundtable. I'm your host for these proceedings. My name is Trey Rowland, and I am joined by almost the full complement of Knowles 24/7, as many people as we could scrounge together during the bye week. I got Zach Blostein, I got Dane Draper, I got Brendan Sonon, I've got Coach Adam Brown, and I've got Kevin Little. We are all here to go through the fine bits and pieces of the car crash that has been Florida State's 1-5 start to the season. It has been awful. It has been disgusting. You've had to sit through it. We've had to analyze it. We're all in this together. So we are going to ask our experts kind of questions post-mortem. We figured the bye week was a good way to do it. Florida State will be playing Duke on Friday night. They are a road underdog to Duke University. That is where we're at right now. So we're going to look at a bunch of things. We're going to start with like micro stuff, and then I think we're going to pull out and try to answer some of those big picture questions you guys really seem to inundate us with on the message board. Before that, we can't be doing these proceedings without our sponsors. And the one that I know that has seen the biggest volume growth this season is Chattanooga Whiskey. My God, could you get through this absolute disaster of a season without the brown hooch that Chattanooga Whiskey produces? I know I couldn't. They're 111th. Their 111 proof is the best. Like, workhorse yeoman guy. It's like, you want to say it's like the utility player, but it's even better than that. I mean, you can get it at an affordable price to get all your stuff done. If you're a little fancy boy like Brendan Sonone, they have all sort of different experimental blends. That's what it's called. Experimental blends. They put it in different casts. They age at different years. It's fine. It's exquisite. It's something to tickle the palate. It's great because when you watch Florida State run for like -5 yards before contact over and over and over again, you just want to start drowning your synapses in alcohol and start making the connections in your brain not work as much. Chattanooga Whiskey can do that, and it can do that deliciously. And as I always say, when you've dulled your senses and you're starting to, you want to get a little wild on the decision making, it's time to sell your house. And who better to sell your house with? Group name, the
Turner
Group.
We obviously didn't discuss that pre-show. I'm going to try it again. Who do you want to sell your house with?
The Turner Group.
Group.
Fantastic. Still out of sync, much like Florida State's offense. That's right, the Turner Group. It is Central Florida and really the state of Florida's best real estate people in the entire world. Buy, sell, rent, second home, vacation, Airbnb, whatever. You got any sort of real estate need, the Turner Group will Sherpa you through this process, much like going up the hills and the peaks of Everest. It can be an intimidating proposition. It can be frightening. Let the Turner Group be your Sherpa so you can survive the perilous world of real estate. They will make it nice, easy, and fun. Drink your Chattanooga whiskey, sell or buy your house with the Turner Group, and we're done. All right, boys, let's hop right into it. Adam, I want to talk to you.
Oh boy. Why me first?
Double barrel, brother. You're going first. What surprised you the most in this season of complete and utter shock?
I think what would surprise me the most is just how unprepared they've looked, especially early. Like, I feel like lately it's been improved in games, but just like defensively, they look completely unprepared in that first game against Georgia Tech. Offensively, they've lacked, like, outside of the first drive against Georgia Tech, they've seemed to just completely lack answers. I would just say, just generally speaking, the first half of the season, they looked totally unprepared for what was going on. As far as who they were playing, where they were playing guys, personnel packages, what they were trying to do, run game wise, how they were trying to use DJ with a passing game. It just looked like a real mess.
Zach, what about you? All these guys, besides Adam, Kevin, myself, Brennan and Dane are at practice. They're in Tallahassee, boots on the ground. From a guy that's like a recruiting specialist outside of Tallahassee, comes in when he needs to. What has surprised you about just this season, and what has been the chatter around, like, when you're talking to recruits like you do, because it's your job, which angers some people, What have they? What's been the most like? What's been their biggest surprise watching this Florida State team?
Yeah, I mean, for me personally, I think the thing that surprised me the most about this season was the fact that they missed on so many guys in the portal. Finally, they had a hit rate that I think we all knew was not going to be sustainable because of how good it was the past few years. But for it to become, what it is now, which is, I mean, essentially you hit on maybe a few guys in the portal that you added of the 17 guys you added this past offseason. That's been what's been the most surprising to me. And that's ultimately why I think, the team hasn't performed super well, is because, a lot of those guys were expected to assume big roles for you, and they just haven't been able to live up to that. But when talking to recruits, honestly, man, recruits, especially in an on-record interview, aren't going to be super harsh about the program, especially if they're committed to Florida State. But they've talked about some of the struggles, especially offensively, and wanting to see more. So that's kind of been the thing, is just hoping that they can get it together moving forward. And I think something that talking to recruits this week on the bye week, got a lot of guys mentioned was seeing Brock Glenn come in, a guy like Tramel Jones. That was encouraging to him, seeing Brock Glenn come in and have an encouraging performance against a top defense like Clemson. And then them FSU seemingly moving more towards a youth movement. That's also been a thing that I think recruits are a fan of. So yeah, I mean, obviously there's been some good and some bad news on the recruiting trail, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit, but the messaging hasn't been too bad.
Anybody else with a surprise that wasn't mentioned yet that really has just reached out and slapped them in the face? Brendan with his finger up, Robert's Rules of Order. Very polite, Brendan. Go ahead. You have the floor.
Thank you. I try to be polite when I can be. So prefacing this with, if I think back the last time we were all together, we're all very wrong about this team.
Yes.
Obviously.
Extremely.
The coaching staff was more wrong about the team. And that surprises me, because they had been really good, even when the team wasn't great. Going back to 2021, when that was an average football team. And they'd been pretty transparent, and I still think they're transparent about this. They've been pretty accurate about what they were going to be or what they could be. And the fact that they misevaluated what they were so dramatically, I think it fits into the points that AB was making, which is how unprepared they look. And, scheme-wise, yes. Personnel-wise, yes. Unprepared for what they actually were and what this was going to be. This slapped them in the face. It was, I think, shocking to everyone involved in the program. And to me, if we're talking about what surprises us, it's their surprise for me.
Yeah. Oh, no matter what happened, especially in the years prior, because they faced some pretty historic, for the wrong reasons, circumstances during their tenure at Florida State. It did seem like there was always an underlying foundation that wasn't shaken. It's like, it's okay. We knew this could happen. We're fine. We have a plan. We have a plan, right? And then now this year it just feels like anarchy, right? The Joker's running around. Everybody, we don't have a plan. It's not good. Like, I don't like the panic. The panic is what got me. My personal biggest surprise has been the absolute regression of some of your guys that were supposed to be pillars, dude. The Darius Washington's play this year, Maurice Smith's play this year, Shaheem Brown's play this year. DJ Lundy was very shaky at the beginning. Just guys that you knew, there was a lot of new on this team, but you knew you could count on these 5 guys. And it was all those 5 guys that have had some of their worst seasons at Florida State during their money years. And that made no sense to me. Another surprise is this absolute disaster of a running game, the worst in the country. Historically, it's on pace to be the worst ever in the history of this school. Dane, you've seen him at practice. We saw him in preseason break some explosive runs. What the hell has happened to this run game in your estimation?
I mean, that's the biggest in-game on the field surprise you could have, because I don't even know. I mean, something that you were talking about just now, the regression of the players in the field, the guys that you thought you could rely on that have been good, who we
Mhm.
thought were even getting better this season. And I feel like on the other side of that, it's like the regression of coaching, of like
Yeah.
Alex Atkins, who you thought you could rely on to build a strong running game, an explosive running game. Mike Norvell, the same thing. And it's been, absolutely complete opposite, obviously. But I mean, I don't know. I think you go back to the staff just severely misevaluating what they had. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know
It's
how,
tough, right?
the talent on the offensive line is obviously better than what they're putting out there. So it's hard to even say that. I don't know. It's just so baffling and confusing. I don't know.
It's interesting because the talent is better, but when we break down the film, and Kev, I'm going to kick it to you next because we break down this film every time, and then Adam, I'm going to let you chime in as well. I'm let my film guys go after this. But we see a lot of times on film, there is talent there, but it's misdeployed. Like you have guys in the run game, like your guards, the guys that you went out to be your guards. Those are dudes that have some talent, and they're not being they're just not being utilized in the best way possible. Putting some of these big plotting dudes out in space. We've seen the screen game. The screen game is abysmal. It's just there's a glob of talent, and normally this coaching staff can get the best out of whatever glob they have every year. And this year it feels like totally the opposite. And the run game is really demonstrative of that. Kev, we look at the film. Why do you like? After thinking about it and looking about it and having nightmares about like just run stuffed at the line of scrimmage, why do you think it sucks so bad this year?
Yeah, I mean, let's be straight. You're not this bad at Florida State for one reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
correct.
If you're looking for a simple explanation, it's not there. You're the second worst team in terms of yards per carry in the country, behind Kent State, I believe.
They actually just passed us, I think, because we were on a bye
they?
week, and I think Kent, the old Golden Flashes racked up some yards. So yeah, we're at the bottom. Pretty terrible.
So that doesn't happen with one problem. So the offensive line's been bad, but that doesn't fully explain everything. Lawrence Toafili is getting over a yard per carry more than everybody else combined. Specifically, Cam Davis is yards before contact than almost everybody else. He has almost double yards per carry than everybody else. So that tells me that whenever you hand the ball off to someone not named Lawrence Toafili, you're leaving yards on the field. I think specifically it's obvious offensive line isn't getting done what they need to get done. I don't think the tight ends are blocking well. I don't think outside of Lawrence Toafili, I don't think you have running backs that are consistently reading the field very well. And some of that's to be expected. You're giving a lot of carries to a true freshman running back, who I believe was a quarterback last season. So that it's not natural for him to be reading these kind of plays at this level, at this speed. And that's something that's not talked about. Your passing game isn't keeping people honest. Your quarterbacks aren't keeping people honest. You can go back, watch basically any game with Jordan Travis. If you just left one person on him, he's going to make that person miss and really, really challenge you. So teams often had to put 2 or 3, or you force other linebackers kind of over the top. Mm-hmm. There's nothing counterbalancing the run game. So you don't have a good offensive line. Let's start there. I'm not trying to make excuses for them. The running backs aren't helping. The passing game's not helping. The nothing about the running game is working. The only thing that kind of works is if you only handed the ball off to Lawrence Toafili, you're now like 72nd in yards per carry, which isn't the worst in the country. So like,
it's so gross. Dude. It's so true, but it's so gross.
There's something to like. You probably have a bottom 80 offensive line and a bottom 80 running back game and a bottom 80 passing game, and they're all kind of adding to each other to make one of the worst offenses in the country.
Well said. Everything sucks. There is no hope. Adam, in your opinion, schematically, like what have you seen that, like, from a guy that historically, and now I will say that last year we did think the running game was a little bit of fool's gold. It was mostly you were kind of willed to some explosive runs by Trey Benson and Jordan Travis. Like there really wasn't a lot of efficiency. So this is something that's been brewing for a little bit. But this year, why did the dam break and unleash the tidal wave of suck upon us?
I mean, generally speaking, because you just got worse at a lot of different places. I mean, Darius Washington's playing worse. Maurice Smith's playing worse. Yeah, you got to wonder, is like Maurice, all those injuries that Maurice has dealt with his entire career, are those catching up to him at this point now in his, this is his 6th year of college football.
It's a while.
We thought Casey Roddick was a miss last year. They went out and chased athletic profile in Terrence Ferguson, and we hated his film when we evaluated his game against USF last year at Bama. He may be a handful of the worst linemen playing P4 football right now. I think there's a PFF grade out there that has him pretty much down there. You lost Richie Leonard, who I think was probably your best offensive lineman. You lost him for the season. Jeremiah Byers has been in and out of the lineup. You're breaking in Jalen Early. You're breaking in Andre Otto. Like, I'm not sure the offensive line is better than what it was last year, and we all thought it was going to be, and it really isn't. And then you factor in the fact that they rely so heavily on tight ends for this run game, and those guys can't block at all. And then your wide receivers stopped blocking this year because you're relying on smaller, faster guys as opposed to bigger, imposing players like a Johnny Wilson or a Keon Coleman, or you had a Micah Pittman 2 years ago who was a more physical slot. Now you're relying on a Malik Benson who's not fully invested in blocking all the time, and Jalen Brown who's a slighter, faster guy. A Ja'Kai Douglas who will give you everything he's got, but we've seen him whiff on screen blocks. And so when you're getting opportunities to get on the edges, those guys aren't doing their job. So, okay, you're worse along the offensive line, just overall ability-wise. You don't block at tight end. You don't block at wide receiver. By the way, you can't push the ball down the field with your passing game. Your quarterbacks have been completely inconsistent all year long.
It's a nice way of putting it, yep.
I mean, at some point, we're all taking a bite of the shit sandwich here.
Doesn't that feel like the embodiment of the entire, like this, what we're describing the offensive line is, or what the run game is? Yeah, multiple issues, a misevaluation of what you are, regression. It just feels, Trey, like this is the football team. Like what we're talking about, the run game is the embodiment of everything else that's wrong with this season right now.
And honestly, it's appropriate because Mike Norvell is a coach that defines himself so much by the running game that he generates. It almost is like a bigger picture, like statement. Like if your run game is crumbling and eroding, it's like that's the integrity. That's like the foundation, the identity of your head man.
And schematically, like they've run counter, didn't work. I talked to somebody, and they thought they knew what the problem was with counter. They came out against BC. They ran it twice. They ran it effectively. It was sample size of 2, so small sample size. They come out in the third game, they couldn't get out of their own way running counter. They dumped that. They've run insert ISO with tight end wings folding in.
Yep.
Hits every once in a while, but they can't get push on people. They've run inside zone. They've run outside zone, just with varying degrees of success. They've attached RPOs. They've not run RPOs. They've attached read options, no read options.
Pin and pull, duo. They really have thrown everything at this. They just stink.
Everything.
But the one problem is that the roster construction makes no sense. You have these slow, giant plotting guards that are natural for like an inside zone duo. Think of what Miami's doing. They're just blocking duo left and right. They're just double teaming up front, getting 2 or 3 yards of push.
280-pound center who can't do any of those things.
Right. Then you have a tiny center who can't do that, right? Who gets blown up by any nose tackle. And then you have, guards. One of your tackles can't pass block and the other one can't run block. And so it's like, what's going on? How does
I don't know.
You built it thinking that you could grab a bunch of randos and do everything well, when in reality you do nothing well because the construction, like,
there's no cohesion.
Well,
there's no cohesion. Nothing builds off. It's all
get 5 Maurice Smiths and run outside zone, or get 5, Keandre Jones and bust people's face open.
It's a grab bag team with running a ton of concepts poorly. Like,
wouldn't you say that wouldn't you say, and I'm curious to Zach's opinion on this, because wouldn't you say in the end what they have built this year is what they've kind of done recruiting wise all along? It's been like, all right, we've pursued these guys out of the high school ranks. and we've had varying levels of success landing them. But when push comes to shove, we're okay not landing them because we're going to lean back on the portal and we're going to try to piecemeal it together and think we can make it work. And I think we're now seeing like all the culmination of all those efforts. Just like Kev's saying, like you've got Jeremiah Byers who cannot. They've altered how they pass block this year to try to fit to Jeremiah Byers' weakness. You've got Keandre Jones, who's not a puller. He's a road grading offensive lineman, but they run counter all the time. You've got Maurice Smith, who is a small, undersized center, tough, scrappy. Obviously, lots of positives to say about him. You've got Terrence Ferguson, a guy you wanted that athleticism so you could try to run counter, but he can't really run block that good. And then you got Darius, Darius. I can't explain Darius.
I don't know what's going on there. Yeah, I really don't.
But doesn't it all come back to like just the whole philosophy, Zach? I mean, in some ways.
Yeah, Zach, is this like the chickens coming home, Bruce? As the guy who has been screaming for like the recruiting, like what does this feel like? Like, is this validated everything?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't feel great. Like I'd rather be wrong and then be a good football team. But
good answer.
No, but I mean, I think back to this. So I wrote an article about a month ago talking about, you know, the high school acquisition and development by members of the staff. And if you look at along the offensive line, which we all know is a developmental position, it's a position where if you're recruiting and developing it right, your guys are probably playing in, you know, a 2 to 3 year span after getting to campus. Well, you know, upon Alex Atkins' arrival to Florida State at the end of 2019, so, you know, beginning that 2020 class, 5 out of the 9 players that he signed in that span have already exited the program. I mean, look at the line this year. You have 2 guys that this staff inherited. They didn't recruit. They inherited Darius Washington and Maurice Smith. And then you have a bunch of other guys that are just, you know, transfers. And I think by now, I mean, what's the big success story they've had in the portal on the O-line? Dylan Gibbons. It's not a position you can consistently go in the portal and land guys that are not only like good, but capable. I mean, you thought that all these guys were going to be capable for you. And clearly, I mean, they're not just capable. You're fielding one of the worst offensive lines in the country. And one of the worst running games in the last decade. So yeah, to me, it is a culmination of not being able to develop high school players well enough over the last, you know, 5 years of this staff's tenure. And, you know, we're seeing it kind of come to fruition this year because once again, they had to rely on the portal to go find guys that they expected to be starters this year, instead of having guys in the wings that they developed for the last 4 seasons to be ready to play this year. That's to me, and that's all over this roster. I mean, you can look at most positions and kind of see that. And that's why I was so adamant about, you know, sharing that I thought there was an issue in FSU's roster building strategy for as long as I did, because, you know, I didn't expect it to be this bad. Obviously, I predicted them to win 8 or 9 games. But I think that, you know, it's some of the stuff is unexplainable. I'm not going to sit here and say I know why Darius Washington and Maurice Smith are playing far worse than they did, you know, at any other point in their FSU career. Or you know, there's a number of other players, like you mentioned, Trey, Shaheem Brown, like all over the roster that are not playing up to the standard that we believe, you know, they were playing at or even better at, you know, before the season. So, yeah, there's an element of, you know, some things that are hard to explain, but also there's reasons why, you know, for reasons for some of the struggles. And I think that has to do with some of their, you know, roster building and the ineffectiveness of their development of those players.
Speaking of hard to explain, Brendan Sonnone, the quarterback situation. You stuck with DJ Uiagalelei to the bitter end, to maybe possible like the detriment of the happiness of your current quarterback room. Like what was going on? I want you to try to talk out, and Dane, I want your opinion on this after it being another guy that has seen this situation at practice. we stuck with him forever, and there has been multiple reports that you guys have put out through the season where other quarterbacks in the room expected to play at different times. Brock Glenn's family was in the stadium for the Memphis game. There was an expectation that Luke Kromenhoek thought he was going to play against Clemson. Just talk about the quarterback situation, why we think it's played out this way, and just what's like the morale in that room right now.
So yeah, we were able to confirm through multiple sources, a handful actually, that there was frustration after the Clemson game, from Luke Kromenhoek and thinking that he was going to play, and I think the plan was for him to play, and I think that plan was probably in that fourth drive, which would have been the drive after Brock Glenn threw the interception. We asked Mike about just how you kind of rotate, how you make the decision if you are going to rotate, what game flow kind of looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And he mentioned that interception. He didn't mention specifically that they were going to put in Luke then, other than saying that there was a plan at some point. But I think that was part of it, is they didn't want to ruin Brock Glenn's confidence. And he goes ahead and leads him down a touchdown drive on that fourth drive, and they stuck with Brock the rest of the game. The Brock being upset to some extent, or at least frustrated after the Memphis game, I was able to confirm that with a couple people as well. So, at various points this season, both of the young quarterbacks have been frustrated with thinking that they had a chance to play. Game flow kind of dictated that wasn't something that FSU thought was beneficial, and ultimately they didn't play, and both were frustrated. Where that stands right now, I think everything's okay at this moment. I think things have been smoothed out, but it's going to be something to watch for the remainder of the 6 games of the season. Why it took so long, I don't have a great idea. We've talked about this before on the pod. We've checked with different sources, and it's never been super clear to me what the hesitation was from Mike Norvell after, 2 games, maybe 3 after that Memphis game. If you want to give him the benefit of the doubt, DJ, you want to give the benefit of the doubt after the BC game. I think that's when a lot of us were kind of like, okay, I think we've seen enough. I think some of it was the dynamic with the young quarterbacks we just talked about. I was able to get that this past week, that to an extent they didn't want the clock to start running with that, and being forced to kind of throw those guys into the mix, and knowing there was a dynamic that one would be unhappy if the other one played. So I think that's part of it. But
what's your opinion? What's your opinion of that? I want to get your opinion of that. The communication to me is the communication to me is interesting, because both guys think they're the number 2. They're clearly not. There is a pecking order. There's communication to each one of these guys that they think they're going to play at different times. That communication is coming from somewhere. They're not just generating these ideas and notions out of the ether. Why are we not being, I don't want to say not being straight, because that's not right, but why is the communication so muddled as far as what their intentions are for these guys?
Yeah, I'm not sure what's getting. I wish I knew for sure there, Trey. Would report that if I knew what the exact disconnect was there. For both players to be frustrated. Now I'm not sure if some of this is just them being competitive and them wanting to play and think they have a shot. And one thing to say you're prepared, one thing to say we have a package for you, one thing to say is, hey, the plan is to get you in on this series, and then that series happens, and whatever the reason is, the offense is sputtering. Against Memphis, you thought you maybe have some level of a lead, and that just obviously went up in smoke on the first drive when you fumbled the football. Mentioned the Clemson background, but there is some disconnect clearly happening there that needs to be better, frankly, moving forward, in order to make sure both those quarterbacks are okay with where they are in the pecking order. I don't love that both have been frustrated. I don't love it for them. I don't love it for the program. It's just, and I think it's just kind of start losing games and people get frustrated. They want to play. They think they're part of the solution. I think that's kind of a good thing.
Right.
But the big picture is, Brock Glenn played well against Clemson. I think we all saw that. I think the metrics bear that out. You think there would be an understanding generally, hey, this is the direction to go for the foreseeable future. But I still think you enter this week against Duke probably trying to balance both those guys, emotionally and maybe even from a playing time perspective. I don't know if that's good or not. I don't have a great feel for that.
Dane, what's been your opinion? You've seen this situation play out. We've seen that, we've reported that DJ was the more consistent during spring camp, fall camp, preseason, but there has been a time where we've seen in the reports you guys have indicated that started to switch during the season. What's been your opinion of the quarterback situation and seeing it on the ground live every day of practice? How mystified were you that we were sticking to our DJ guns so heavily?
I mean, I'm watching every practice too, and I'm still thinking like, just turn the page. Even if one guy, even if the veteran here, DJ is a little bit more consistent in practice, I never. I mean, at times it was a significant difference or something, but I feel like, I don't know, what's happening on the field has to matter. And I mean, you hear all the time how, great coaching staffs get it wrong too. Like, I mean, this staff included, obviously, like a lot of staffs get quarterback wrong. And what you see on the playing field has to matter, and I feel like it just wasn't for some reason. And that was really frustrating to watch. And then you do see good practices from Brock. And there was a couple maybe that he was like, I felt, better than DJ that day. And I don't know why that wasn't mattering as much as I felt like it should. I feel like as much as, I don't know, I feel like everyone would agree with that. Like, it was just baffling to me, honestly.
And Dane, and honestly, the injury kind of took a little bit of that made the decision making for Mike Norvell. In your opinion, Dane, if DJ was totally fine, who would have started against Clemson and who would be starting against Duke?
I've gone.
What do you
back and
think?
forth on
Speculating, hypothetical, obviously.
I think at some point it had to have been Brock. I mean, you just gotta do it. I think it would be such a unique situation if he didn't. I mean, you see all around the country guys struggle and then they get benched. You go to, I mean, some of these programs don't even have good backups and you still see them get an opportunity. And FSU has not one, but two really promising guys, young guys who can develop and improve and really find value in these, in-game experiences and learn. I mean, two guys that you are, like, FSU, we don't think the plan is for them to go after a transfer in the offseason. We fully expect, right? I mean, for it to be one of these two guys next season. Why well, I don't know.
Oh, I guess never mind.
Like,
there's a little bit of disagreement there from the group. That's interesting.
I don't know what to expect
so
with
valuable.
anything at this point. So, like, I don't know.
Does anybody's opinion?
Sorry,
ahead,
I think predicting anything to do with this upcoming offseason is going to be really hard to do.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be extremely volatile and expect the unexpected. Well, I think with the quarterback situation, just touching that quickly, like, they're going to lose one of those two guys, one of the two young guys after this season. Whether that's after this upcoming offseason or after the spring in that short window, I think they'll lose one of those two guys. So you got to, like, I completely agree with Dane. Like, I just don't. Obviously, everyone in the fan base agrees with this too. Like, no one understands why Norvell rolled with DJ for so long. I don't know if I agree with you, Dane, that he would have switched out of DJ, and I find it crazy. I find it crazy. I find it crazy to the point that, like, this Brock playing started because DJ got hurt, not because, like, I don't believe that the excuse that he was going to go into that game. I just don't.
I don't buy he was going to go to him in the freaking SMU game.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what Zach was saying.
That's what I'm saying.
He's full of it.
I think he was going to go with him after the third but like that switch was made pretty quickly.
But even so, that's what, like, he's down 3 scores in that game. It
was a shitty situation to put him in. I'm not saying that any of it has been well done in my estimation.
We've got enough Mike Norvell data at this point. There was not a chance in hell Mike Norvell was not going to play DJ against Clemson.
Yeah, I think it would have been this week for Brock.
Mike would have eaten that freaking story up. DJ against Clemson. Oh, it's so wonderful. He's gonna respond. And come on.
it's so funny to
I
me.
think that Mike was potentially all right. So here's I'm going to take all these different excuses and all these different theories and throw them together in some disgusting gumbo because we saw what the result was for a few weeks. I think part of it for a few weeks for the last month and a half. I think part of it was a level of hubris of thinking that you could fix DJ Ongole. That's what you had going into the season. The plan that they had made sense, but it was all predicated on running the football. And we all agree once you realized you couldn't run the football at all, you had the wrong quarterback in place just because it magnified his deficiencies. I think that was difficult for Mike to pivot off of. Well, I also think that he looked at the supporting cast. We're privy to the numbers. We see what they are nationally in pass blocking metrics and run blocking metrics and catch rate. I don't think he loved the idea of throwing Brock Glenn or Luke Romanhoek out there with the supporting cast performing as poorly as it was. And then I think that the final part of it was that he didn't want to get the clock started on the Brock Luke dynamic that Zach just articulated well. You probably see one transfer at some point.
That's the weakest. That's the weakest part of that.
That's the dumbest.
I'm not telling you that I don't agree with it. I don't think I'm just saying.
I just think that excuse is the worst excuse out of all of those. To not.
Yes, let's not give ourselves more opportunity to let that clock
figure out who it should be.
Yeah. I wrote
after clearly an offseason of off-field of practice clearly has not been as valuable as you thought it was on the field. Clearly outweighs that. We've learned.
Again,
I mean,
Brendan, this is your fault.
Hard to evaluate an off-season now.
Thank you, Ken.
Top to bottom, unprepared.
All right,
Brendan,
interesting.
You were informing the staff.
Ask the hard questions and the win games.
I was told DJ was good.
All right, fellas, take a moment. Because that wasn't Brendan. That's what Brendan thinks the decision making was. That wasn't actually Brendan's decision. I do love watching the messenger get pelted with arrows and die in real time.
I guarantee you, Trey.
That's pretty sick. I love that.
Someone is going to misinterpret that and be like, I really don't agree with what Sonone does.
Oh, dude, it was tight. It was like that game Missile Command and all the missiles came down and annihilated you. Anyway, I do think that it is interesting that for a team that is clear and a coaching staff that's in a panic with like the run game, they're throwing all this crap there. They don't know what they're doing. They're throwing guys in and out. The only thing that they had strict, like orthodox adherence to was the DJ Uiagalelei. Like, by God, what's your starting quarterback? Everything else is whatever, grab bag. We'll try to figure it out. We'll throw it against the wall. We'll crap in our hand. But by God, that DJ Uiagalelei will start every game until he turns into dust.
This is legitimately like this was the first season where I felt like there were just a lot of. It felt like coming in like as the season's played out. Maybe it's hindsight. It felt like there had just been a lot of parties doing their own thing, and then like there's been one little message: oh, we're going to run the ball, or we're going to pull this Oklahoma or Oregon State offensive stuff, and it just felt like there's been so many different like pieces putting all this together.
Mm-hmm.
And in the past it's felt so cohesive, like there's been one plan and one like strategy to go out and accomplish, and we were going to do this thing and we were going to get these guys and try to get these players to fit this is the first year where it's really just felt so disjointed.
Adam,
I think
season
that's a byproduct of losing too. Like
yeah.
But
Adam, to me this season has felt like the worst cutaway Family Guy joke in history. It's every single random thing, and it didn't turn out. It didn't work out the way they thought. It was not funny. Kev, what are you going to say?
I have like a little pet theory.
Oh, well,
I didn't start. I heard it from someone.
Interesting. Because after this, we're going to pull out and we're going to start talking about how they build on positivity, and then we're going to really take a macro look and build out and look. And I'm going to ask these guys some fairly tough questions, but Kev, hit me with your conspiracy theory, my man. Who's turning the frogs gay?
So 2021, they had a roster. They started building it. They won 10 games. Or I guess this is 22. This is 2022. Yep. They win 10 games. They've got momentum going. All the reports are, and I was at some of these practices in the spring, that going into 2023, they were building off of what they had. They had a big returning nucleus. They were just adding a couple of pieces, and all the reports and all of you guys and myself included were at the practice, and I felt like this feels like a fall practice. This feels like they're continuing to install stuff on top of what they did last year. Like normally in a spring practice, you break everything down to its bare bones to build it back up, right? You're getting new kids every year. You've got to kind of reset, but it felt like they had the luxury where they didn't have to reset between 22 and 23.
Mm-hmm.
And that gave them the momentum to have a really good football team in 2023 that was doing advanced concepts earlier in the season and was more prepared to kind of hit the ground running. My pet theory is essentially they convinced themselves that they could do that again in 2024. And instead of building from the base, they tried to decorate the top of the cake. And instead of getting these fundamentals set, they were doing these things. They were throwing these kind of flourishes onto this offense that really these players weren't prepared to take. And the same with the defense. And that's why you get to Georgia Tech and you've got some cute plays here, but the fundamentals of how you're running your base play aren't there. Or the defense is doing things fundamentally that just don't make sense. Like that they're not prepared for very fundamental concepts because I think that the teaching and the coaching didn't bring them back to the foundations. But I was not all transparency. This is why I kind of want to bring this up here because I was not at practice. I don't know if that was something that was observable at practice or not.
I think there was an over-reliance on, number one, their own coaching ability. And I think there was an over-reliance on they got a bunch of veteran players, but they weren't veteran in this system. And I think there might have been a little over-reliance on these guys have played a lot of football. They'll adjust quick. And then, like Kev said, you can't run your base play, and you still can't really run it that well 6 games into the season. Brendan, what do you think? Was there less of a reliance on the basics during spring? Like maybe a little bit more focus on install when they should have broken it down a little bit?
I don't know.
And that's hard to answer in retrospect.
Yeah, I don't know. I do think to a point you guys were making that resonated to me is that this staff thought that they, based on what they've done in previous years and the track record of it, to be fair to them, like was
good, very
sound.
Good. Yeah.
I think they thought they could coach up anyone, anywhere, anytime, and like they would make it work. And you look at the transfer portal additions that they took. The guys who have worked out generally have been guys who had a decent track record at prior institutions with, their floor was established. Grady Kelly like makes a jump up and play, but like it's been solid and he's like exactly what you thought he was going to be. There's like 2 or 3 others when I was doing a recap of what they've been who've like, yeah, like Jalen Lucas is another of like that's kind of what you thought he was going to be. And what he had shown while at Indiana. But generally, they took at a really high rate this year guys who they had really high grades on in high school, who had a lot of physical tools and measurement stuff that they coveted. And they said, hey, give us a prototypical defensive end, 6'5", 260, and we will turn him into something. Give us a 6'2" nickel corner who we thought looked great in high school. We had a high school coach who worked with him directly. We know who he is, and this will be plug and play. We'll get it figured out. He'll be our starter. They're comparing Earl Little Jr. to Jarian Jones. And the Mike Norvell press release of Mike Norvell had when they signed Earl Little Jr., they were calling him Jerry Jones, comparison. And he's now moved to safety after 4 or 5 games because he couldn't play nickel. And that to me just that Malik Benson, you thought you were going to get an NFL caliber wide receiver. He's not that right now. And Jalen, we can go down the list of guys who they rolled the dice with.
87% of the transfers.
Rolled the dice.
Yeah. And so anyways, that just, and I think they thought that they would just be able to lean on what they've done with coaching and developing in past years. And for whatever reason, and that's like the secret sauce that I don't think any of us can put our fingers on. We can theorize. Something just didn't click.
And it's also, even if it wasn't like functional, it was attitudinal. Like that stuff seeps into the program. Like there was this expectation of these guys doing things that they hadn't really seen them do consistently that they would, and they just never did. So I want to move on because I want to start talking about some macro stuff, going outside 30,000 foot level. But for this season, which we still have half of left, Dane, is there a realistic way for the back half of the season to actually be encouraging? Is there something that could happen that could be a building block for these guys to lay a foundation upon? And with that being said, do you think that that's actually going to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly pretty excited. Specifically for quarterback, I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, the biggest thing moving forward is finding young guys that can, that you can keep, that you can build around, who, show promise for the rest of the year. But that starts with quarterback. I mean, I think if you, over the next few weeks, if Brockland or Luke Romanhawk, really showed something kind of special, I think that would be really encouraging. I mean, that's the most important player on the field.
Mm-hmm.
And I think keeping one of those guys is very feasible, even if there is a lot of turnover and, things look a whole lot different, like Zach is alluding to earlier. That would be the biggest thing. I think finding young, like pass catchers, especially, that are promising, because it looks like your wide receiver class that we love so much is falling apart. And, they have plenty of talent, young talent in the room right now that could be something. And, if they could develop and impress as true freshmen this year, like that would be really cool. I think if like LaWayne McCoy, for example, started producing and showed what he can be, maybe Elijah Moore gets in the field. I don't know, like Amari Williams. I mean, I called Amari Williams like a potential first-round pick in the offseason. Like I still believe that, So that would be the biggest stuff. It's individual guys that you can build around and know that they are worth prioritize, like to keep in the offseason, because they're actually worth it.
Do you think it's realistic for all those things to happen? Do you expect that?
I expect the quarterback situation to kind of figure itself out, because I think you actually have two really quality players in that room. I mean, I'm excited to see Brock play against a defense that isn't well above average. Like that'll be cool. I don't know if Duke is that this weekend entirely, but like, yeah, I'm excited for that. I think, seeing him improve the offense on his back, it will be interesting, because I think that will happen, and I think he will get a little better. I think Mike Norvell is as confusing as this season has been from a coaching standpoint, and the lack of development and the lack of, correct expectation and stuff like that. Like Mike Norvell is a good quarterback coach, I think, and I think Tony Tokars is too. We'll see. I trust that a little bit. And then I think at least one of those talented guys, the pass catchers, showing out. I think that's realistic.
I think so.
Just a quick fact check. Duke is the second best defense Florida State will have played. They are ranked 20th on defensive F plus, where Clemson is 7th, and that's an opponent adjusted metric.
Yeah, that's why I walked back.
Sorry, Clemson is 17th, Duke is 20th, so they're pretty close.
Okay, well, that sucks.
Yay!
Cool.
Thanks, Kev. Well, actually, Brock's gonna get his ass. Never mind.
Yeah, facts have hurt my feelings. Zach, think about things that this staff they are selling a product on the trail, and I want to get to you because you're the trail guy. What's something that can happen? Like maybe it's a lot of the stuff that what Dane said. I thought was a very thoughtful answer. Maybe there's a lot of stuff that Dane said. What on the back half can they build to make this a more sellable product on the trail for some guys that not exactly Glengarry, Glen Ross? Like what do you think could happen?
Yeah, I mean, well, the old like, hey, we're playing young guys all over the field. Is definitely, I think encouraging to some players that want to see the field early. That's obviously not a pitch you can make to everyone, but I do think that there are players out there that you can pitch that to. And that's, I mean, that is what
just in the next week they just start like throwing out all these articles about how often they're playing true freshmen and start like shitting on Miami for playing all these grad transfers.
Ah, the
Oh, what a
tables
twist.
have
Full
turned. You want to
circle.
you want to do a little table turn in action? That'd be
It'd be
fun.
so poetic.
Yeah, that'd
Sorry.
be fun. No, the controlling message, they don't do much of that. But yeah, I mean, Trey, I think the biggest thing is playing those young guys and selling that. I mean, in reality, a lot of this stuff's going to come down to FSU getting guys to campus, selling what they've done in the past, selling what they're going to do with these young guys, and what that's going to look like with the additions of this year's class. And honestly, it's a lot of these recruitments are going to come down to NIL, and I think FSU's prepared to fight in that in those battles. So we'll see how it kind of plays out, but I definitely do think those will be the primary selling points.
Freedom youngins. Brendan, I want to talk. This is where I want to step back. We talked a lot about the coaching staff. This feels different than any other year at Florida State, even the bad ones under Mike Norvell. My question to you, you've seen him here the whole time. Are these even still the same guys? Like, they're technically the same guys basically from 2019, but are these really the same guys that came here to Florida State ready to overhaul this program? Are these still the same guys coaching up Deuce Spann on the sideline when they're up like 6 touchdowns against Miami? Like, do you feel that way? Do you feel that this is still the same staff, or have they been monumentally changed by grind, overload, seminal events like the snub? What do you think? Well, you talk to these guys every day. Feel the same?
I don't want to paint with a broad brush and say like collective yes, but there are examples of it where, yeah, Trey, I do feel that there's a shift. And I think so I was contemplating whether I wanted to go down this direction or not, but I think it's important for us to be transparent to our readers and like listeners here. Like, Mike Norvell just doesn't seem like the same guy to me. Like, I think he's been changed. I don't know if it was from the snub. I don't know.
How so? In what way?
I remember, and this is going to be like small. It's like a microcosm here, but I remember, Chris went to Ireland. I stayed home, and so I was covering the game, remotely and watching the game on TV. And I was watching it with my wife. And that very first drive, they show Mike when he's calling plays, and like he looks timid, I think was the word I used. He just didn't look like himself. And we haven't seen a whole lot of fire from him on the sideline this season. In practice, like, I don't think it's quite the same. Like, there'd be times where, in years where he would get into it with players, and then would switch over, and like, if they did something right the next play, it was that like going back and forth. And we saw that even like in preseason, like that still existed, but something has shifted during the season where I think he was so shell-shocked by what the results were, that there's like this fire, like it doesn't burn quite as brightly as it did before. Dane, you're there at practice almost every day with me. Like, have you seen similar there? He doesn't seem the same to me.
Yeah, I wasn't exactly thinking that, but I mean,
You don't have to agree with it if you're not seeing it.
I can pick up some of what you're saying and agree with it. Yeah. But I think, I don't know, the biggest thing to me has been like, I want to say like accountability in practice even, and that's kind of tough to touch on. I don't even know how much I can talk about that, but like, I mean, we write about that at times.
Like,
like
that Boston College practice, that Friday practice, is that the sort of stuff that you're hinting at?
Not really,
dare
but
you,
that was
Brendan.
certainly something weird. Yeah.
What are you talking about,
Brendan
Dane?
talk about that if he wants to, but
go ahead. What do you mean? Like, and try to, like you said, keep it general. You don't have to name specific names. But what kind of examples are you talking about? Like accountability?
I think players with low energy that don't look as focused, or players messing up and not like, at least to our eyes, maybe it's happening behind the scenes. It totally could be. Obviously, it's not working, but it totally could be. It just doesn't seem like that's happening as much as maybe it should. And that comes off as unfocused. It comes off as like, I don't want to say unserious, but it comes off as something not right. I don't know. It doesn't seem, I guess it doesn't seem right in some way.
It seems off, right? It seems off. Brendan, do you want to elaborate on anything that Dane said? And then Adam, I want to ask your opinion on some of this stuff, because these are conversations that us three have had off camera for quite a while now, and it is really, and they were hypothetical. We didn't really know, but it seems like there's a lot of stuff that's
while
starting to show.
while Brendan's thinking, like I watch every practice video. Like I can't remember an orange jersey until like this past week. Like, and you used to always see him in
some before, but yeah, not as maybe as prevalent. If I think about it,
letting things slide seems like. Brendan, what do you think? Elaborate on what Dane's saying, because there's been really in your face examples of it, like that Boston College like kind of fake machismo practice. But it seems like it's something that's just kind of pervasive, dude. Like you've seen, there hasn't really been any negative consequences for not giving maximum effort on every play. Like I haven't seen, and I don't know if that's a consequence of your talented depth not being there, but it's just, there's a lot of stuff where it's like, we'll look at some of the plays that were analyzing on the field. It was like, well, the effort there sucked. And that same kid is out in the next play. And it's like, why? What message are you sending?
That does exist. I mean, we used it like the BC, and I don't relish like singling players out, but I think it is instructive, like to kind of talk about what we're seeing at practice. We have the access to be there. So like to be transparent, like that Friday BC practice, it was gross. And like, there was players fighting with each other, like well after the whistle, like, and it was players taking cheap shots, like on walk-ons. And it wasn't just like, it wasn't intense, right? It was like beating up on people and not in the way that felt productive. I got pushed back for that, for what we saw. But like, I think that bared out, like, and actually things that you saw in practice, like Terrence Ferguson got a penalty for a late hit that BC game, and he was involved of hitting someone late in practice. And, they broke up the scuffle, but like that was it, really. At least that we could see. And maybe there is like more happening, after practice. There's some sort of discipline or something. But like I feel like that stuff used to get like shut down pretty quickly. Conrad Hussey took a shot at a walk-on like after the play, and we've seen him getting like penalties.
They do practice like they play, dude. I will say that. That is true.
And like I'm not singling out the players because I want fans to go after them or something, because like it's not being corrected in real time the way that I feel like it has in the past. And again, like I hate saying this so much, Trey. I don't know why. Like I don't know why that's different. But like we're now hearing, and like this is again what Zach made the point earlier, and I made it with the quarterbacks, like with the freshman quarterbacks, like when losing happens, you start hearing some of this stuff more, where players get frustrated. But like we're hearing from like we know the Free Them Youngins like movement, and I don't like that. Like I think that's like not the way to handle that for young players. Like I'm all for playing young players. The ones who are saying like Free Them Youngins like probably need to be lining up correctly in practice and have trust. No, I'm serious. Yeah. I'm serious, because they're playing the ones who are at least like who are doing that, and they're getting opportunities. But there are players who are frustrated because they see repeat offenders of either not doing the right things in practice or not doing the right things away from practice, and feel like there aren't a ton of consequences. And we've heard that from a few people now, where, again, I don't know if that's a consequence of losing. I don't know if that is just what's real and how players are feeling. I tend to go towards the latter there. But this all kind of goes together hand in hand with like accountability, attention to detail. It's not clicking. It's not resonating. Again, I'm sorry, I don't have a great answer why.
Adam, I want to give your thoughts on that too, as a guy who's been on coaching staffs when things like this start to creep, how tough it is to combat. And then I also want to have a question to you, just moving on to another subject. How has this season affected like how you analyze the observations and the evaluations that the staff gives us and their evaluation? Like, is your confidence in them eroded to that they can actually trust their eyes?
Yeah, I don't know how I can trust them moving forward. I mean, I've had some people that are around the program that thought not that this outcome was going to happen, but that things were a mess. Like even before the GT game, like they were saying to me, like there is a fracture right now.
And the players, what do you mean by like it didn't feel like a
No,
unified
just
team?
kind of just didn't feel cohesive, didn't
Gotcha.
feel put together,
and that's played
like
out.
it has in the past. And this was somebody that hadn't been around as much. So I mean, it was interesting to hear that, but then they were so freaking high on themselves. So I don't. They're going to be hard to. It's going to be hard to believe them the next time they have feelings on what they've built.
And
I
don't
just think that's just
been
natural, right? I mean, it's not that
right.
I'm not calling them liars. I'm not saying that they don't know what they're looking at. Like, there's a natural like
grain of salt. Like
there's a natural consequence that's going to come from being that wrong. I mean, it just is what it is.
I mean,
Yeah,
look at that quarterback situation. Cam Ward might be the best quarterback in the country right now, and we're fighting that DJ got benched after 5 games instead of 2 games. Like, that's such a
Cam was
dramatic.
their first choice. To be fair, he was. They did evaluate that one correctly. Whether they executed it, whether they were ever going to get him.
But that's been the complaint the whole time. Their evaluations have never really been questionable. It's whether or not they're able to close on these things. And you're seeing,
but also they did value DJ in some remotely similar-ish level.
They thought they were comparable players.
That's why they compensated him as such. Like, that's true. And they went after him. There's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of transfers right now doing really well. I'm not saying they should have taken Malik Williams at UNLV or something because he was backup to another guy, Matthew Sluka. Probably shouldn't have been the backup in the first place, but that's
neither here nor there.
But like,
let's talk UNLV.
But like, that guy's a stud. Diego Pavi is a stud. Like, a lot of these guys, I mean,
and even if they're not studs, there's guys that are
the easiest choice out there to like look and know that he exists.
The process for the transfer stuff at quarterback was not good. Like, it wasn't, and that was something that we questioned like in real time. Like, that's not hindsight. There's plenty that we've missed along the way, and like I thought DJ Uiagalelei would be serviceable. I thought you could build an offense around him. No, but like the amount of money that you spent on him was unnecessary at the time. And like, to be fair, the first offer for Cam Ward was probably twice as much as what the first offer was for DJ Uiagalelei. They weren't particularly close in my estimation.
Brendan, on the quarterback evaluation process, was everybody on the same page there as far as what they did? Was there any conflict? I don't. If you want to get into it, if you think there is, or think there is,
I don't know that. I think Cam Ward was the first choice, and I think that I don't know how much I can get into that right now, Trey.
Don't worry about it. Not a problem. Not a problem.
I don't think everyone was enamored with DJ Uiagalelei, and I think you had to talk yourself into him.
And I think you could tell looking for just how long it took, and then they had to circle back, and they almost lost the kid. Like, it wasn't even like a done. They ended up having to give him a raise for their own like lack of urgency.
I've never gotten a good answer as to like why.
But then that doesn't match with how slow they were to move on from. I don't know. I don't want to go back to this conversation, but I know it just doesn't match up.
But to me, it's all about the analysis, the evaluation, things like this. Like, Zach, we talked about analyzing now what the coaches give us with a little bit more skepticism. What about you? Like, this thing that we've had, this is the first time that we've had them have a major miss on their quality of play. They have misevaluated recruitments, how good they were in recruitments for years. What do you think? Like, what do you think now when you get feedback from a coach on how good a recruitment is? How do you analyze it yourself, being a recruiting guy?
Yeah, well, I guess how I try to put less blame on, like, the sources on staff or whatever, but more so trying to better my sourcing in other areas of a recruitment, right? So maybe, getting closer to people around a recruit, talking to individuals that cover other programs involved in a recruitment. That's all super helpful when trying to paint a full picture. And that's part of reporting. You're not always going to have super, I'm not trying to call anyone out. I'm just saying, like, in general, like, I think, it's part of reporting is being able to judge how trustworthy what you get from sources is. And that's definitely been something that I've had to learn over the years. And get better at. So I'm not perfect at it for sure, but I do think that, it's something I'm still trying to get better at when it comes to sourcing all over a recruitment, to be able to kind of paint the full picture without, because if I'm only getting things from one side, and it doesn't even just have to be from the FSU side, if I'm getting things straight from a recruitment, there's there are ulterior motives there sometimes too, especially with the influx of NIL and agents and all that. So you run into that. So it's on all sides. But if I'm doing my job right and well, I should be able to find out what I want to find out if I'm sourcing the right way. So I try not to put as much blame on on the staff or whatever, if that's what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Brendan, just kind of wrapping this up. There's a couple questions left, but I want to get answers from most everybody, because I find these to be infinitely interesting, at least just where everybody's temperature is at right now. Brendan put out a really good article about precipitous falls for programs that were starting to get some momentum, like kind of how this season came out of nowhere, 10 wins, 13 wins. Hope you get 3. Like, that has happened before. They've been playing college football for hundreds of years. It's happened before. It's not necessarily a rare thing for a program to come back down to the basement after reaching heights. It is a rare thing for that same person who is the head of it to build it back up. So Brendan did some good job analyzing those things. And there's not that many instances of it that are complete analogs, like, are similar to what Florida State's going through. So let's talk about the offseason. Adam, get that good stretching, buddy. I saw that. I know you're thinking deep. What's something that could happen this season or not happen this offseason that would put FSU in your mind in full, we're kind of just playing out the string with our current administration?
That was for me, because you mentioned AB stretching. For me?
No, this is for Adam. I want Adam.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
I want everybody. I'm going to go around the horn, because I think this is a good question.
What can happen?
Like, what's something that could happen or not happen?
Mike Norvell has a absolute shift in philosophies in one of two things: either off-field staffing or recruiting philosophies. If he does one of those two things, it means he's open to the concept that what he's been doing doesn't work long-term, and he needs to step into the big leagues.
And that would give you some confidence that, hey,
it would, because it means he's open-minded.
AB, what would, like, the recruiting issues they're having right now from a losing season are well documented at this point? Like, what would a shift in recruiting philosophy even look like to you this offseason that would make you feel good? Like, to actually see quantifiable, like, oh, it's shifted.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a tough part about it, right? I mean, because they're not going to suddenly start landing a bunch of 5-stars. But
we'll play into that, like, if we actually think some of these things are going to happen later. So good tease. Brendan, same question to you. What's something that in your mind is like, red flag, red flag, red flag, I'm not liking where this is going?
Oh, if they stay put for the most part with coaching staff and not adding to the front office, I think those things would be concerning. I don't have a magic number of like, oh, you have to get rid of this many coaches for me to feel good. I think it's like the definition of pornography, like, when you see it.
For sure.
Brendan loves using that, by the way. I've heard it like 4 times in the last year.
Oh, that sucks. Yeah, I thought it was clever.
Thanks for keeping analytics on that one, Dano. I would, going back to the article that you referenced, Trey, that initially confused me. I think that one of the most common themes when we look at like programs that take this pretty big drop off and then have a chance of coming back to where they were before, at least moving in that direction. It is really hard to get it back once you lose it. There's some level of change that happens in the coaching staff or with philosophy of how you operate your offense or defense. There's something pretty seismic that happens. And if they go and say, hey, we're going to run it back with the same exact offensive staff that is going to have one of the worst offenses in the country, or the recruiting results that you see way too often in prep recruiting on defense, like then I would have concerns. I already have concerns. That it would be another concern that would be added to the many that have stacked up from the last, what a difference 2 months makes in the last few months.
Anybody else have anything different than what Adam or Brendan alluded to? Anything else specifically where it was like, oh man, if I see that? Or does anybody have like a magic number in mind of like changes? Not exactly where they come from, but like what's the level? I don't know. Does anyone want to give a level of what they would like to see and a level of what they're actually expecting?
Go
ahead,
ahead.
Adam.
Well,
Very
I'll just add. I'll
eager.
add to what I was saying earlier. Like, I've been kind of vocal that I thought that the portal season for them this past year was laziness. I thought that they just decided they were going to rely on a lot of high school evaluations and fall back on those, and they weren't necessarily as prepared for the portal season as they needed it.
They got caught off guard, dude. That first week was bad.
And I think it goes beyond just like, oh, we thought guys were going to come play for us for less money. I think it goes beyond that personally. I think if they get back to evaluating the guys that are in front of them, like they did with a Jermaine Johnson, like they did with a Jared Verse, like finding these guys and investing the energy into them, knowing what they're going to be, like I think that would be a good sign because I don't think that they did that this year.
Keir Thomas me, like all of it, like as someone who might have some physical, like okay, they're not going to have the perfect dimensions, or there's some reason why
a freaking football team.
Dimitri Emmanuel
plays football and has proven that he can play football. Like I think you probably need to get like a dozen or so Keir Thomas type of players to feel good about like that they've got it shifted, you have figured out less on the potential and upside, more football players and productivity. It's how you can kind of start to turn it around to some extent.
I'm getting us way off track here, Trey, but
okay,
like, doesn't it feel like they just decided like that we're going to chase these analytics of what we saw these dudes as when they came out, and like we're not really evaluating what they did in college.
I'll be honest, that's driven me crazy because the main benefit of the transfer portal is it's a year of evaluation of not what if, of what these guys actually did, and they threw that away. And I don't know if it was because they wanted to have a shift in strategy or they needed something to justify just how crappy they were doing in the portal. And they kind of married on this, invest in a couple years. I don't know. I don't know if it was something that was generated after the fact or they were caught in the middle of a firestorm they weren't ready for. And it's like, okay, we're going to do it this way now because here's an untapped market. But I don't get using the transfer portal and not evaluating production. That's what it's there for. And a couple years ago, like a kid like a Kyle Kennard, bro, like FSU staff would have been all over that. And it was like they were allergic to it. Was just weird. It was everything was off, and it's been off since December. Zach, what are you going to say?
I think the biggest example of what you guys are talking about is Malik Benson.
Mm-hmm, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Betting on Benson. The dude had 100.
This isn't here to defend himself.
No, I'm not. That's not Chris.
I know.
That was the staff. Yeah.
A bad Bama passing game told you what that kid was going to be.
Yeah, they were constantly complaining about the
it's not like he's a young player either, right? Like some of their evals, like a Jalen Brown, like that made sense to me because like he was only he was in a stacked LSU receiver room, so he was not going to have production even if he excelled expectations out of high school. But you have a guy like Malik Benson who is entering his final year of college football this season, and he obviously only had 1 year of Power 4 football after coming from JUCO, but he didn't do much there, and you were betting on him being your wide receiver one.
Yeah, it's like you're back to like you took a step back to like when you were taking kids like Andrew Parchment and stuff like that. And at least Parchment had like a lot of production in college, and then he got an injury or whatever. But it's like, what? I just didn't get why.
On and on.
It does seem to me like
Ferguson.
It does seem like the use of the portal for high potential players was a very specific Band-Aid for the whiffs in high school recruiting. I remember Zach and Chris having this conversation back in the offseason, and Zach's point was a good one at the time. And it's not that the portal is a bad thing. It's not that, their actions told us that they were not getting the guys that they wanted because they wanted Jeremiah Smith. Mm-hmm. They wanted Armando Blunt. They wanted the defensive end.
KJ Bolden.
They wanted all of those guys. Those were all takes for them. Those were all guys that they were in striking position for, and for one reason or another, failed to land or retain. And so instead, I think you went and said, well, we're going to get guys with multiple years of eligibility with really high athletic profiles based on our previous scouting. And I think they went way too heavy in hindsight in that area. But like, I think that's a direct, like the emphasis on that type of profile in the transfer portal. You're not going to have the room for it if you're go ahead and getting the high school, like elite recruits that you wanted.
So here's my follow-up question to that then. Did they get caught after the snub going 13-0 saying we've got to try to recapture that magic to get back there?
You know
and
what?
chasing all those high-profile guys that you had all that data on coming out of high school that you evaluated as elite prospects coming out of high school.
And I want to tack
instead
something.
of going and getting a Kyle Kennard who
Right.
maybe was a better floor, but not the upside that you thought.
I want to tack something onto that too, Adam. If they would have a bigger off-season, like an off-field support staff that all their job was to do was to pour through like transfer portal film, they shouldn't. Them getting caught off guard, we're talking about it like it was a matter of fact because it did happen. It's inexcusable that they were. Like,
I mean, you could have a million. It takes exactly 0 off-field staff to look at all of the snaps that Earl Little Jr. had at Alabama.
He didn't need anybody there. But yeah, good to what do you think about Adam's point there, Brendan?
What was it again? I'm sorry.
Do you believe that they went?
If
they left, or they had a plan going into the off season prior to, I'm sure they established their plans in November or October, November. What the off season? No,
go ahead. Shake.
I'm shaking my head. I don't know if the portal if the snub skewed what they were going to do. No one's told me that. I know, like I've heard Bud talk about in the Nolecast is like a theory. I think it's like a sound theory. I don't think they had a really great plan going into this offseason. I think we saw them move much faster and much quicker for a reason on players in the 2023 offseason in the transfer portal than we did this past one.
The groundwork was laid, right?
Yes. And so, no, I don't think the plan shifted. I don't think they had an overly aggressive plan other than maybe waiting on some of the Alabama guys if they had word that because that was a long rumored thing that like Saban. So maybe they thought they'd be able to go and get some players. I don't know if they knew who, but they'd be able to go and go that route to an extent. But even that, it's only like 4 or 5 of your transfers.
I mean,
the big ones didn't happen either. So
and there was some name like without getting specific, there were names that they thought were going to enter the portal that didn't, and so you wasted time. And
I think that feels like a way more damning answer than I was hoping for.
Sorry, it probably was, but I mean,
Kev, something to get to because I want to ask the next question to you. But do you have anything else you want to say?
I was going to say, I don't think that they saw this as a remote possibility. What's happened this season. So if you're going to go into the transfer portal, why not get the high upside guys? You're going to have a rebuilding. You're going to have an 8, 9, 10 win season, but then you're going to have guys that have that high upside for 2025, where you have hope to build to win big. So that's probably the thought process, and I don't think that's a flawed thought process. But nowhere along the line have you built the floor. So if you're not building the floor through high school guys and you're not building the floor through the portal, well, now you have no floor. And we've seen what happens when you build a house with no foundation.
Boo! So speaking of this foundationless house, Kevin, your opinion, is Florida State in the toughest spot ever during Mike Norvell's tenure? Like, I remember that feeling post Jacksonville State. I don't know if I was on record, but I know I was with you. I was talking to you two, and I was like, I don't think old Mikey's going to get us through this one, dude. I think we're in too much of a hole with like everything of the baggage of this loss. And I was incorrect. Do you think we're in a tougher spot than we were post Jacksonville State?
I think it's hard. His leash is shorter. I've been kind of saying this for a while that I don't think the recruiting stuff is the end of the world. You can win with how they've been recruiting if you have the hit rate they had, but it shortens that leash dramatically because fans want to see that you win on early signing day, and they don't like it when you don't. And that is important, and it's a bad look. And as long as you're winning, it doesn't matter. But as soon as you stop winning, you can't say, hey, I'm building something, because they're not. But I will say the one hope Mike Norvell has is that a lot of these freshmen look really promising. A lot of these young guys look the part. You know, Landon Thomas looked good. Amari Williams looked good. I think Cam Davis has some growth to do, but he's there. These young linebackers, these young secondary players. There is a team here that in 2 or 3 years can be good. There is a rebound here.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, are these kids going to jet after this season, and then you're in trouble? And can you build around them? Like if you can hold these kids here, if you can say, hey, I'm going to take this young nucleus that I do genuinely think is a good football team and build around them, there's something there. There is more young talent on this team than there was in 2020. But that's easier said than done in the days of the transfer portal when these kids can jet for greener pastures like that.
Dane, same question to you. Toughest spot that we've ever been in under Mike. Is he facing his most insurmountable task right now?
Yeah, I think it is, because I think you've already done all the building and all that, you know, like you got
This is what you built.
it's already been built. And now you're like back to ground zero, and you're not even to the point where it can be ground zero yet, because you need to make sure it becomes that in the off season. I feel like personally, yeah, it feels rough, man. I don't know. It's not looking great right now. We'll see, you know. I guess he's done it before, but it's a different situation. I mean, who the hell knows? How many coaches have made it out from this kind of situation? Brenner wrote about that.
Like
a
3 or
couple months ago
4.
or something.
It doesn't really
Yeah.
happen. And a couple of them ended up retiring a few years later. They were older. Like Brian Kelly. It's kind of like
Brian
one
Kelly.
of the
Tomato face. He's everywhere. 6 degrees of tomato face. Well, that's great, Kev. I love that you said that, Dane. Who the hell knows? Because I'm going to ask you that question. I'm going to have you guys predict. I want to get these answers on record. Dodge the question if you must, but I find this one to be interesting. Adam, actually, Zach, I'm going to start with you, and we'll go whoop. We'll end with Brendan. Zach, do you ultimately think it will get turned around under Mike Norvell, or is somebody else going to have to turn around Florida State in the end?
I'm going to be an optimist. I'm saying yes.
Why?
Wow.
Here's why. Brendan and I recall this vividly.
Ooh.
After signing day 2021, Travis Hunter flips from Florida State. We both had a conversation within that next week saying we both thought that Mike Norvell was going to be fired before he could, turn things around. We were wrong, right? At least in the short term. And because of that, I think that there is going to be a lot of pressure on him, obviously, to make change. And I think due to that, we'll see. Because if you look at FSU and how much they're spending on assistants and this coaching staff, it's a lot of money. And I understand it's going to be a lot of money for some of these buyouts as well as to hire new coaches.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's what's going to need to happen. And I'll say I'll be an optimist and say that he gets it turned around by bringing in guys that can help their recruiting woes.
I like that. Dane, your thoughts? I wonder if it'll be different than Zach.
It's kind of I think he can get it turned around towards way better than it is now. Okay, so they're going to need to change. He's going to need to change philosophy, obviously, with how he recruits. He's going to need to embrace change, obviously. Hopefully that's as obvious to him as it is to us, because holy crap. But I lost my train of thought.
You're good. He needs to embrace change, but you think he will ultimately.
Dane's brain wandered to Mike real quick. What if Mike doesn't think that this needs to change? Is that where your brain went, Dane?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm just like, oh no, you know.
You're doubting you're in the middle of your own answer. You're doubting yourself. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. So I lost where I was again.
We
What did you
just
say,
said
Trey?
Norvell
That
You
got
were
me back on the
embracing.
point?
Okay, so you were saying you liked what Zach was saying. You're saying that Mike needs to embrace change. And at the beginning of your own
Yeah,
answer, it sounded
and
like you think he was. Now I don't know anymore.
exactly. No, I think at some point he will embrace it enough to where things start to look better. And I feel like the leash, given his contract,
Mhm.
is long enough to where, and he's proven that he can build a good roster, or he can field a good football team. Obviously, I mean, Mike Norvell has a pretty good resume in totality, right?
Yes.
So, I mean, he's a very bright guy, knows what he's doing. Before this year, we would have called him a top 5 coach in the country, probably. A lot of people did nationally. And I think he will have enough time to turn it around enough to not lose his job, and hopefully learn from these experiences, because he's not a finished product. He's a pretty young coach, and clearly there's a whole lot to learn from going on right now. A whole lot. And we'll see. It'll be a fun adventure, guys. It'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
Who is that?
dude. That was sick. Great answer, man. I think what you're trying to say is you think that he'll get it turned around, but I don't think you ever it doesn't sound like you see him getting back to like the heights of like 13-0. Like I don't think you think he's ever going to get back there again. I think that's what you're starting to say.
Certainly not under his current mindset of things with roster building. And I thought that the whole time. I mean, I've said, I don't know, like in private, I thought that 13-0 season was the best he was ever going to get, just based on how he likes to build rosters and stuff. I think obviously that has to change, and it might. And maybe it's for the best. Maybe he becomes a championship caliber head coach because he learned from these mistakes.
Maybe. Young guy, dude.
That can
Adam,
happen.
question to you, Adam.
No. Nope.
How predictable.
Hard no. Why?
I mean, just how often does
History's
how
not on
often
its
do
side.
people completely change their philosophies on things?
Not
I
often.
mean, a lot of times you are what you are and you believe what you believe. I mean, Zach has said much to Brendan's disgust, and they've argued about it. Mike doesn't like recruiting. Now all of a sudden, Mike's going to like recruiting. That just doesn't happen. I mean, you find me examples of where that happens. I don't buy it. I don't buy that he's going to do those things. There's going to be pressure. You know what happens when people put pressure on guys that have been doing it a long time and have had success? It creates angst. It creates frustration. It creates a lot of bad tension.
What do you feel like, Dane?
I feel like Mike, I don't entirely buy that he doesn't like recruiting to where he can't like turn that kind of thing around. I feel like he's a lot better recruiter than his entire staff. And that is kind of what matters. Like, I feel like he himself is very, very valuable. Like, he can be a complete coach in what he is, but his flaws is his refusal to build, or a cabinet around him that's worth a shit.
There's the culmination of my answer. Mike's philosophy is he himself can work out of every problem, and he has not figured out that he needs all parts around him to be working just as hard as him.
Did you guys go on our board this weekend? It just made me think of like who he's brought in the past and like his acumen as a coach hiring other coaches. And
he's had to a lot. Yeah, a lot of his guys got, especially at Memphis, a lot of his guys got poached.
Yeah, a lot of
Did you find this weekend of college football encouraging or discouraging of like Kenny Dillingham and Dan
Lanning from Oregon? Yeah.
Smiles a lot. Smiles way too much for my liking, but disregard that. Is that more encouraging to you? Be like he's hired these guys, and it's just frustrating on the other side of that to like
he's got an eye for talent. It's almost like the master needs to become the student a little bit more, because I think he might need to sit down with Dan Lanning and see what Dan Lanning's opinion is on recruiting after a couple of years with Kirby Smart. So I agree. The bones are good. The foundation's there. It's just, you can't work your way out of every problem, man. Like, you can't swim upstream your whole life. Like, you're going to get burnt out, and then you're going to lose your fire. And once the fire's gone, everything, I don't know. To me, I found what his surrogates did, I found that to be encouraging. The way that they spoke about him, like, there was some unexpected good publicity for Mike Norvell out of Dan Lanning's story. That's cool. I like having a good guy as a head coach. But, man, 30, 40 minutes ago, we're expecting a dude that like half of us think was going to play DJ Uyongola against Clemson and maybe against Duke, and we expect him to have an entire sea change of his philosophy. That sounds a little. I don't see how you square those two circles.
This guy has
Go ahead,
proven
Zach.
to
You're
be
trying to be
awfully loyal.
if you're
to
trying to be,
everything.
if you're trying to be optimistic, like part of that could be, and I don't know if I buy this theory, so I don't know why I'm throwing it out there, Trey. But
Yeah, I want
do
to be
think
realistic.
You need to be hired as the staff's PR manager.
Yeah, you should.
or so like I think part of the reflection is going to have to come in the offseason, and it'd be ideal if it's happening now. But I think it's so week to week, and you're just trying to get through it. That there's not the bandwidth that Mike Norvell can probably have to be planning ahead in the future. So, him making decisions in season may not be indicative of what he's planning in the off season. Potentially, that's a caveat I think worth noting.
Zach, you've been very patient. Go ahead.
I have a question that I want to ask you guys. Do you think that if and when it's time for Mike Norvell to make staff changes, he knows what a good recruiter looks like?
Does he care what a good recruiter looks like?
No, but if he's going to truly change,
better.
if he's going to truly change, like we're talking about, and try to, revive this program, like that's going to be, I think, the most important question when looking at the new hires. Do we think that he knows what a good recruiter looks like?
Well, wasn't Dillingham a pretty decent recruiter?
He's a very good recruiter.
Yeah.
He is a very good recruiter.
He was by far I think on their staff, and all, if you look at all this, staff they've had in the past 5 years, he's by far, I think, the best recruiter when it comes to getting them in recruitments, and being a.
But is that because Kenny went to Auburn and learned a thing or two?
It depends, because I feel like he's more. I don't know. To answer your question, Zach, I kind of think no. And I feel like he'd have a better chance on the offensive side of the ball, because I feel like he takes chances with his assistant hires on the offensive side of the ball on like youth and like vivacity and vibrancy. And a lot of those times, those guys just end up being better recruiters because he has control. He's familiar with the offense. He's fine to have that young, youthful energy because he knows that he can direct it in his defense. I feel like in his offense, excuse me. I feel like on defense, because that's not what he's comfortable with, he defers to age, experience, coaching. Look at all the coaches on the defensive side of the ball. Odell Haggins, Adam Fuller, Randy by God Shannon. Old football guys that are either not good recruiters or used to be good recruiters. And he did, his latest hire on that side of the ball was Patrick Surtain. That does seem to be kind of the same mold that we're looking at there. But I don't know. So to answer your question in totality, Zach, and it kind of springs off Adam's question, he's just going to hire the best coaches, and it's going to, dude, we're going to have to roll the dice to see if they're good recruiters or not. He'll never place recruiting above all else. He'll never.
The leopard doesn't change its spots.
He'll never hire like a mercenary, like a Tim Brewster back in the day. One of those dudes will never see time on Mike Norvell's coaching staff. Like one of those, like, what you're getting. Like, I don't think so. Do you guys think so? Because I sure as hell don't think so.
But here's the thing, though. Like, I think he's got some good recruiters on his staff. I just don't know if he.
Do you?
Yeah, I mean, David Johnson's had success recruiting.
Atkins has too. I mean, I think he's a natural guy that people like.
I just think it's got to be something he believes in and he enforces. And to date, that hasn't happened.
Yeah, I think it's up for argument on whether, like, because obviously Brendan and I have talked about that before, whether he truly enjoys recruiting. But, I think that he's like, he definitely invests a lot of time into it himself. I think the bigger issue, then we've talked about this, a ton, but the accountability aspect, like that needs to be what changes with him. Because there is, I mean, I've heard countless stories, but just to name a few, like, prospects going 3 weeks without getting a contact from a coach, and that being brought to his attention and nothing changing or nothing being done about it. When it comes to like reprimanding, because I've heard him get on his coaches for on-field issues, like, hey, your guy's not showing up to meetings, like, you need to fix that. Like, that is an issue. And yelling at them in front of it, the entire coaching staff in a meeting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that happens in recruiting. So that's what needs to change. I think it's less about, his personal enjoyment of it, right? It's part of the job.
Yeah.
And you think it will, though? Like, you think that will change?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I want to be an optimist and be like, hey, he's going to understand that this needs to change, or he's going to lose his job.
It's true. It's a lot of money. That's a very good motivator. Kev, the question to you.
Yeah, we're going.
Two
way
yeses,
back.
one no.
I'm gonna say no, which is kind of surprising me. I've kind of been in Mike Norvell's camp ever since he got here. One of the things I've always really appreciated about Mike Norvell is that he up until this year, he didn't seem to make the same mistake twice, at least in terms of, the football side of it. Recruiting is a different question, but he seemed to adjust. He seemed to grow. The Jacksonville State game in particular was a low point, and it felt like their approach to that game was off, and it felt like they addressed that. They changed something. Something moved. They were willing to change. They were willing to adapt. They were willing to throw different things out there to see what worked and to go with what worked. And they started Tate Rodemaker before Jordan Travis, and then they pulled him after like 2 series, and Jordan Travis looked good, and they ran with that, and they started building a different offense a little bit around him, or at least accentuating their offense. And their offense looked dramatically different than it did with Mackenzie Milton. And it felt like they were willing to grow. They were willing to adapt. They were willing to change. And I was kind of in the camp of, I'm cool taking my lumps with this guy because I think there's a trajectory. I think there's movement. I don't think you're going to see the same mistakes twice. And to me, 2 things happened this year. One, I saw a very similar offense to go back and watch that Jacksonville State game. That offense looks very similar to this offense. It's stagnant. You don't have good receivers. Nobody's getting open. You can't trust your offensive line. You have an immobile quarterback that's not helping you out. The flaws we saw in that offense in Jacksonville State were recreated 3 years later. He made the same mistake twice. And then instead of changing or growing or moving actively, he stuck with that quarterback and he didn't change anything. We saw them grasping at straws at different schematic things we were talking about earlier. But the problem was the personnel. And I'm going to be honest, I'm kind of tired. I've been saying DJ is not a good quarterback for a very long time. And I thought it was very obvious. And to be honest, everybody else thought it was obvious. It's go into the wider world of college football. This was obvious.
Yeah. I mean, no one thought he was going to be this bad. I think no
one thought he'd be this bad. Sure. But is it really someone you want to build? Sorry. It's not really that important. Getting DJ is not the problem. Keeping DJ for 5 games is the problem.
Yeah.
I've seen the staff that was so willing to change and innovate and do something different and grow and not make the same mistake 5 straight games this year.
Same obvious mistake. Yeah.
When everybody in the world was telling them it wasn't. And it feels like they're no longer that staff that wants to grow and change and learn from their mistakes. They've become settled, and that scares me. And once that happens, there's a level of pride and arrogance that kind of has to be accompanied by the unwillingness to change and adapt. And I'm worried that that's where they're at, and I'm worried that the changes won't happen. And so I'm going to say no, just based off of the lack of real desire for change that we've seen in the past 8 months.
Well said. Brendan, you're the tiebreaker.
Oh, that's right. Game 1 already. I know what I know what Zach and I had talked about back in 2021 of just based on the way we thought that Mike was a good coach, and we were proven correct that he was a good coach, and I still think is a good coach. But the circumstances were such that it felt insurmountable. But they found a way, and I learned in that moment, like, I'm not going to bet against Mike Norvell. That's something I told myself then, and likewise many times with players in this program, learned that development happens at all times, and to not discount that someone can still improve and get better. That being said, I also know what the numbers are. I know because I looked them up. I know because we researched it ad nauseum, and the amount of coaches who build it up and lose it, very few of them get to build it back up again. Now, Mike will probably have the benefit of time. I don't think, unless he wants to cut it short himself, I think that you have years with him just based on the financials of it. I think you're probably overextended financially with other projects. You just signed him to a massive contract extension. Years and years. Willie's was like a $20-something million buyout. This is $70 million. Like it's or 60, 70. It's totally different is where you're at right now. You have years of it. I know I'm playing both sides of the fence here.
What's it gonna be, Hoss?
And my gut, based on what we've seen, based on how lost the program feels. This isn't 2021 where you were building it. It's been built. And you deviated, I think, from some of your core ethos as a program with how you went about building this specific collection of players. Some of the things that you have not corrected from a personality standpoint in season. I'm very afraid that, like, for Florida State's sake, that Mike Norvell has lost his way. And maybe an offseason of getting into the offseason, having a little bit of time to breathe and recalibrate can change that. But no, where I'm sitting right now, the answer is no. Like, I don't think that it's likely that Mike Norvell gets it turned around. It's very much so stacked against him. Once again, this time less circumstantial. Much of it is his own decisions. I think that's the part that really, really is concerning. Is he's had the resources, he's had time. This is his vision. This isn't year 2. This isn't year 1.5 after a COVID year. This is year 5 now. And you're 1-5 at the midway point of the season in the earlier part of your schedule. That should be easier. You failed. You failed it in almost every sense of the way. Every sense of the word of failure. It's occurred the first half of the season. I don't know how you come out, the other side of it okay.
It's your house, man. If you look up and the cross beams are crooked and the drywall sucks, you built it. A lot different than 2021. I agree with you. Well said, boys. I think we said it all. My God, what a lucky listenership and viewership we have, because we will dive into these topics. We have not lost our fire. Our house is on a solid foundation here at Knowles 24/7. We are here to we're content machines, baby, and you guys deserve the best. If you are not on the board, Knowles247.com, that's the place to be for all the recruiting info. We got a game this week again on Friday night. Let's see if Dirty Mike and the boys can prove us wrong. Apparently they're playing against a pretty good defense. Thanks again for that. Thanks again for that, Kev. Ouchies. Anyway, go on Knowles247.com where we're gonna have all the info for you. If you're listening to this on the Bench podcast feed, we thank you. 5-star review. I feel like you guys haven't asked for that in a while. Give a little 5-star review. I think it's good for the algorithm. It's good for your soul. Give a 5-star review. Write something nice.
Brendan will drink a glass of whiskey if you do.
Yeah.
Or if you don't.
Something out of character. Anyway, and then if you're not, the YouTube channel, Knowles 24/7 YouTube, X's and Knowles YouTube, subscribe, put notifications on. Listen, guys, we got through a lot of stuff here. You have gone through what feels like 17 seasons in only one half. We are going to be here with you as your emotional support avatars to get you informed and keep you smiling. What should be a great back half of the season. We love you here at Knowles247.com, and we truly, truly appreciate you giving us the time that you have. Keep smiling. Keep on chopping.